Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm Fox and today I wanted to bring you the final entry in my best PvP builds of TU12.1 and beyond series. This video is part 4, which will be solo builds. I have two builds to show you today, a long range build and a short range build, and both of these are designed to essentially go into the dark zone solo if you're just looking to do a little bit of farming or you want to try and take on some rogues and you don't have a group, or if you're looking to solo queue into conflict and you don't want to have to worry about the builds that your teammates have. You can just play a build that will kind of cover all bases. What we're looking for here is survivability and of course damage. So we need to be able to survive potentially more than one agent at the same time whilst being able to do enough damage to kill said agents. So what we'll do then in the usual fashion is go through the two builds. I'll be starting with the long range build, and this will all be timestamped below, by the way, so if you want to go in the description below you will see the timestamps for both builds, including the stats of both builds. What I am then going to do is load into a conflict game with the longer range build, the AR build, just to demonstrate how powerful that can be. That is my personal favourite out of the two, but I do use both quite a lot actually. It just depends on a lot of different factors. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started with build number 1. Okay, so this is my first of the two builds and my personal favourite. This is a high armour, high damage AR build that is designed to have a lot of survivability with the combination of perfect, efficient and firewall, and a lot of damage without the need for proccing in sync. I know in sync is the best damage talent in the game, but I've always found that against multiple agents it just isn't that good, as you're relying too much on re-procking a skill every 5 seconds and it all just takes out of the combat. So this build is designed to just get in there, do as much damage as is humanly possible with a very simple loadout, and essentially win that 1v2 or 3 or whatever it is that you're coming up against. So what we'll do then is start from the top and work our way down, and then I'll show you the stats of this particular build. We are using Firewall for the main reason that the armor kit pairs very well with Perfect Efficient. So by default the Firewall armor kit will give you 200% of your armor and your health back over a 10-second window, which is extremely powerful. It's the best armor kit in PvP, quite comfortably so. It also gives us some of the nice features. If you do run with a team, they will gain 10% more damage to enemies that you are within 10 meters of. Which is always useful, and you get a very powerful striker shield as well, which allows you to do more damage when again you are within that 10-meter range. Now this is admittedly a long range build, but if you do end up in that close range combat, then at least you have those features there to help you out. You also have a very effective grenade. This cluster grenade is one of the widest effect grenades in the game, great for closing kills for somebody that you just gun down behind cover. The weapons that we are using here, now I've gone for the carbine because I feel that it is the best all-round assault rifle in the game. Ultimately you need to pick an assault rifle that you can reliably use from pretty much any range, so it wants to have good stability and accuracy as well as semi-reasonable DPS. I feel that the carbine 7 kind of hits all of these, and I opted for Optimist as my talent. So for your minor attribute you want to be rolling damage to targets out of cover, as you can see I've done on the right hand side there. Now which talent you run is entirely your choice. There are some noticeable ones. Optimist, Strained and In Sync are probably your best bets. You've also got Measured and Ranger depending on your playstyle, but I just feel that Optimist for a 790 RPM assault rifle is very good. It just means that we do more weapon damage for every 10% missing from the magazine, up to that 30% in total. Nothing you need to do, just fire your gun and that's that. Second weapon, once again, is entirely your choice. I'm a big fan of the Nemesis because it can one-shot on a lot of builds at the moment if you hit the headshot just by charging it up. But if you'd rather go for a short-range weapon to pair up with what is essentially a long-range assault rifle, then by all means go for the an SMG. So whichever one it is that you feel comfortable with. I wouldn't recommend the Lady Death, as if you're going to be swapping on to that, you won't have any stacks built up. So maybe like an Optimus Vector, or an MP5, or whichever one you're most comfortable with. And then for your sidearm, same thing I always recommend on pretty much all PvP builds. There are only really two in the game that are viable in my opinion, or at least best in slot. One is the named card pistol that is a Dark Zone exclusive with the +1 skill tier. I roll this to finisher to give myself the 30% crit chance and damage for 15 seconds if I'm able to both down and then kill an agent with this. Great to swap out to if somebody is low and you need to reload on your main weapon, as the handling on these is very high, so you can swap to them very quickly. The other one that I would suggest, which does pack even more of a punch and comes with the perfect finisher talent, would be the name Magnum the Orbit, which once again is a Dark Zone exclusive. This actually gives us 5% more chance and 10% more damage. So, and the fact that it packs quite a punch when you land your shots, means that this is probably a better option. But either two would be fantastic. So let's have a look at the gear pieces themselves. We are running 4 blue on this build, which I definitely feel is the sweet spot. We have gone for Coyotes here purely for the reason that it can flesh out our crit chance and crit damage to even greater levels, regardless of the range that we are at. You want to aim for 50% crit chance if you're going to run Coyotes. If you don't want to run this, you could always just include a Seska, or if you're good with your headshots, a Providence. It doesn't really make a difference, but I do like the Coyote purely for that reason. As I'm spec'd at 50%, I'm going to get 10% crit chance and damage from the 15 to 25 meter range, which is ultimately where I want to be starting my fight. But if somebody does push quite close range, I'm going to gain that 25% critical hit damage, and this is true for anybody else in my conflict team if I do happen to solo queue there. And as I'm still at 50% crit chance, with that additional 25% crit damage, it still works out very well. So Coyotes at a 50% crit chance is definitely best in slot for this build. The centrepiece of this build will of course be the Everyday Carrier. This is a named Bellstone Armory chest piece that gives us 1% armor regen for the one piece. Mine is luckily very well rolled to armor, crit chance and crit damage, and as is the case with every piece on this build, that's basically what you're looking for, as high of those 3 stats as possible. And then what I've opted for here is the Perfectly Efficient talent. So if we just change it over to PvP, using an armor kit has a 75% chance to not consume the armor kit. So this alone is very powerful. In the Dark Zone we gain 4 armor kits, and in Conflict we gain 2. And of course we know that with Firewall these heal us for 200% over the course of that 10 seconds. However, the Perfectly Efficient also buffs the bonus provided by that Specialization armor kit by 50%. So this now means that we are gaining 300% of our armor and health back over that same 10-second window. Which is awesome, because whenever you are in a fight you can take a bit of damage, get behind cover, pop your armor kit. There is a very strong chance that you're not going to use it, and then you are, I won't say unkillable, but you're exceptionally hard to kill over the next 10 seconds, as you're basically gaining back 30% of your armor and health every second for that 10 seconds. Very powerful. The Everyday Carrier is one of the best, if not the best chest piece in the game for PvP. It fits in so many builds, but it is definitely strongest with Firewall for personal heals and Survivalist for a tank-based healer. So very powerful and definitely the centerpiece of this build. The rest of the build is just aimed at fleshing out my damage, even though we have 4 blue. So we included 1 Fenris, which is the holster. This gives us the 10% assault rifle damage, and this is once again rolled just like the chest to armor, crit chance and crit damage. Again, the staple of any DPS build would be Fox's Prayer and Contractor's Gloves. No matter which way you look at it, these are just best in slot. They do more damage than any other combination of items here, apart from maybe Sawyer's knee pads, but ultimately they're not always the best in slot for PvP. Fox's Prayer gives us the 8% damage to targets out of cover, which is multiplicative and works versus shields, agents and deployed skills. And Contractor's Gloves gives us the 8% multiplicative damage to armor, which works versus specifically agents and their shields. I will have 1 roll to crit chance and 1 roll to crit damage, both of course roll to blue. If you don't have a pair of these yet, I highly recommend before you do any PvP DPS builds that you get farming for these. What you really want is to have 1 blue pair and 1 red pair in both slots, just so that you have a lot of flexibility with your builds, ideally with crit chance and or damage on them. The final piece, which is the one piece that I would change, is a Vigilance Grupo Sombra backpack. Now the Grupo Sombra itself is fantastic. It does give us the 15% crit damage, although if you don't have this you could always just look at something like a Walker for example. This is rolled to weapon damage with crit chance and crit damage, so these are the 2 reds on the build with the Coyotes, and this has given me the Vigilance talent. Now Vigilance isn't a bad talent, it's in fact one of the best talents in the game for PvP, but in a 1v1 or a 1v2 situation you're not going to have really any uptime on this, so what I personally recommend with this is to go for Concussion. If you want to run a EMP jammer or some skill that can essentially apply status effect, then Wicked is also a very good choice. Versatile is very strong. If you're going to run a shotgun for your secondary, you can just swap between the 2. So ultimately whatever damage talent, even Companion if you want to run the Defender drone instead of the decoy. So it's a shame I've got Vigilance here, but when paired with the decoy this can be very powerful if you are the person initiating the fight, as you will have 25% multiplicative damage right up until you yourself take damage. The skills that I opted to use for here, now the decoy is entirely your choice. If you want to run Wicked, you may want to consider a second status based skills. You have 100% uptime, but in the Dark Zone I just feel that the decoy is very powerful. When you are on decoy, your health stat, basically everything above your head, your nameplate appears over your decoy instead, so it's quite easy to be more stealthy, therefore taking greater advantage of vigilance. And it's also great for getting out of trouble in the Dark Zone as well. You can just drop this as you're running away, and it will just, you know, hopefully keep you running away from you long enough to get an armor kit off, in which case you can just push and aggressively kill them. So decoy is very good, but by all means, if you want to switch this off to the striker shield, 20 MP jammer, a stinger, you know, a defender drone for companion, whatever you feel is most appropriate. What I do think is very good for solo builds is the EMP sticky bomb. This is quite easy to hip fire into the floor as it has quite a wide radius, and what this will do is not only have a very long duration for the EMP, about 3 times the length of the EMP jammer, but it also staggers your enemy and is guaranteed to break basically any shield in the game, even a tier 6 bulwark. So if somebody is pushing you, you can just fire this at the floor where they're running, detonate it, and it will stagger them, which means that you will, if you have it, proc Wicked, but more importantly just be able to clean up your kill whilst hopefully keeping your vigilance active for longer. A very powerful skill, only a 26-second cooldown on this build with no skill haste, rolled on 20 of my gear pieces, so this, you can use this in almost every engagement. Very powerful. So that's the end of the long range build. Let's have a quick look at the stats and then we'll move into the short range build before I ultimately load into a conflict game solo to demonstrate this particular build. So looking at my stats, you can see that I'm at 33.8k PvP weapon damage without any of my bonuses applied. As stated before, I'm at 50% crit chance here, just because I have coyotes, and then everything else has gone into crit damage. The way that you want to aim to hit your crit chance of 50% is to start first of all with your weapon mods. So use whichever weapon mod you need to hit your crit chance. You see I've got the laser pointer and the muzzle brake here. I'm actually a big fan of the ACOG scope at the moment, as it does improve the base range of all weapons by 20%, which is substantial, and it is a very clean sight when you aim in. But what is probably a better choice is the C79 scope, as this does give you still a range scope, albeit it doesn't buff the base range, but it gives you more crit chance. So that is also a very powerful option. But always start with your weapons for your crit chance, and then if you need to, use the mods on your gear if your crit chance options aren't as high as mine. I have 3 12% crit damage mods, but if you need crit chance, use these second, and then, you know, aim for that 50%. So 50% crit chance, 156 crit damage, so both these are very high considering we're on a 4 blue build with some named items in there. Headshot damage is just a default value. Damage to armor is at 8% from the contractors, damage to health is 21% from the max roll on the carbine, and whilst it doesn't show it here, we also have 18% damage to targets out of cover from the weapon, minor attribute, and of course Fox's Prayer. You see my range has been buffed quite significantly because of the scope that I'm using, but this is not a necessity. And if we look at my armor stats, you'll see that with the 4 blue max rolled, I'm at 1.474 million with a 1% armor regen, which is quite nice for just getting out of trouble as well. No, you can't face tank with that outside of your armor kit, but the 1% is definitely noticeable. Bit of health on kill from Firewall, and everything else here is just based on a maxed out watch level with the Firewall specialization. So that is the build. That's build number 1, the range build. What we're now going to do is go into the close range build, and then we'll do some conflict solo gameplay. Okay, so build number 2 is a Lady Death 6 blue armor regen build utilizing Perfect Intimidate and Adrenaline Rush. What this build essentially offers us is a large amount of instant burst damage with all of the amplified damage we have, but with the survivability to not quite face tank, but certainly take full advantage of the 6 blues with all of the armor regen. What I've done here is used a specific combination of pieces, which are quite flexible by the way, so you're not restricted to what you see in front of you, but I feel that I've hit the best possible combination in terms of survivability and raw damage. So once again, starting from the top, we are using Firewall for similar reasons to before. We do get that 200% armor and health back over the 10 seconds with the armor kit, which for a close range Lady Death build is a must in my opinion. I'm, always running Firewall on my Lady Death builds, and again, if you do end up with a team in conflict, you're going to give them 10% additional damage to any enemy that you are within 10 meters of, which is of course the Intimidate range. We're still rocking the very same grenade, which is great for closing kills, and if we do choose to run the Striker shield, it is just a more powerful version of the Crusader shield. The weapon that we are using is of course the Lady Death. I still need to optimise mine actually, but this comes intrinsically with damage to armour, which isn't as good as damage to targets out of cover, as it is a smaller number, but it's still a multiplicative stat and therefore useful. When we move by either sprinting or just walking, we do gain stacks up to 32 in total, which is the mag size of the weapon, and then each of those amplified stacks gives us a total of 60% amplified damage. Don't forget, as far as the tier list goes, that the worst kind of damage is additive, then multiplicative, which is your damage to armor, contractors, foxes, that sort of thing, and then amplified, which is also multiplicative, but it's applied in a separate bracket at the end of the equation, which means it gives overall a more powerful buff. So 10% amplified for the most part, depending on the build, will give more damage than 10% multiplicative, such as damage to targets out of cover. When we get a kill, we actually gain 20% movement speed for 10 seconds. So this is also fantastic for getting into the next kill or getting out of that engagement once you just close the kill. And this does proc when you down an agent as opposed to fully kill them off. So you can down them and then just run away if you are a little bit low whilst your teammates finish off the kills for you. The second weapon that I'm using is a long range AR. As I always recommend, if you're running a Lady Death build, you need to be running an AR for your secondary. ARs come intrinsically with damage to damage to health, and you can roll damage to targets out of coverage and minor attribute, which you always should do. These two both work against deployed skills, so mortar turrets, stingers, that kind of thing, any sort of hive. These are very powerful for breaking them down. This is just an Optimus C-tar. Which one you use here is entirely your choice. I could just use the carbine, to be honest, but yeah, use whatever you want. And then same as the previous build, the only two pistols I ever recommend using, sidearms, will be the Orbit and the named card. Both are DZ exclusives. Perfect Finisher is available on the Orbit, which is my personal preference, but you could also run Finisher with a +1 skill tit on the named card. Moving down to the gear pieces, so we are running 2 pieces of Golan on this build. The one piece gives us 10% status effects, which isn't very useful as we're not using any status, but there is no reason why you can't switch onto a jammer just to get a little bit more duration if you want to shut down somebody's skills for a bit longer. But more importantly, the 2 piece does give us 1% armor regen. Now this build has 3% in total, and this is the first. And what you want to do, just like the previous build and like most PvP builds, is to roll every single piece with armor and then crit chance and crit damage where possible. You are aiming for the 60% cap on this build, so you use your mods. As a rocking and exotic, you'll need to use your gear mods potentially to flesh these out, but ultimately that is what you're aiming for. My second piece of Golan is rolled in exactly the same way. This is my Hunter Killer chest piece. Now you don't need to run the Hunter Killer, nor do you need to have a Golan as a chest, but you definitely want the 2 piece of Golan anywhere other than your knees and gloves. So if you end up with the backpack or the holster or whatever else, that's absolutely fine. Perfect Intimidate actually gives us 5% more versus the standard Intimidate. So while you have bonus armor, amplifies total weapon damage by 40% to enemies within 10 meters. You can obtain this chest piece every week from Cassie as long as you have killed all 8 hunter engagements in New York. So I think there's 13 individual hunters, but essentially once you've cleared all 8 of those engagements, you will then have access to the chest in Haven, which will drop this chest, and once you've got it there, you can then go to Cassie every week and she will have a brand new version. So you might get a pretty well rolled version. The one that I have here was actually for sale not that long ago as of the release of this video, and it only took a very small amount of optimizing to get it to the triple god that you see before you. But yeah, if you don't have the perfect Intimidate, you're not interested in killing those hunters, you can just simply use the standard Intimidate chest here as long as it is one of the brand sets that we are using. So the second piece of armor regen comes from the 1 piece Bellstone. This is actually rolled to armor regen, but the good news with a Lady Death build, if you have a maxed out watch level and your crit chance is 20% or higher, you can basically hit cap or close to cap with 2 out of your 6 pieces not having crit chance. So of course the 2 Golan pieces have both crit chance and crit damage, but you'll notice here that this backpack actually has armor regen and crit damage. This is fine. If you get a couple of pieces that have crit damage and, I don't know, Hasbro or weapon handling is actually a very powerful stat with a Lady Death, still use it. You don't need crit chance across the board, it will be wasted, so you might as well take advantage of some different minor attributes. I was happy with the max roll of armor regen here, and this is an Adrenaline Rush Bellstone backpack, which gives me my bonus armor to proc Intimidate. Now don't forget that you only get 10% in PvP when you're in range, 10 meter range of an enemy, but you do have 3 individual stacks, so you could get up to 30%, but as this is based on your max armor, having the 6 blue just means that this proc lasts for longer, which means you're more likely to have your Intimidate bonus. The third and final piece of armor regen comes from the DZ exclusive Emperor's Guard. Now I appreciate that there are some exclusive items in here that are quite hard to get, but ultimately this is, in my opinion, the single best way to spec a short range solo based build, so this is going to take a bit of farming. This does give you the 1% armor regen, and I have rolled these to armor, which you definitely need to do. Again, if you can get a pair with crit chance, crit damage, or weapon handling, or even armor regen, you'll be absolutely fine. Don't worry too much if you can't get crit damage as I have. Yes, it is best in slot for damage, but it is by no means a necessity. The Murakami 20% skill duration buffs both the skills that we are using, so we're actually getting some additional use out of this as well. So that's the 3% armor regen. The final two pieces are purely here to, or need to be here to buff your damage, and I found the single strongest combination was to go for the Sokolov, which I've once again rolled to armor, crit chance and crit damage as my holster. This gives us a 10% additive bonus to our base weapon, our base SMG damage, and you know, this just stacks very well with all the multiplicative and amplified damage boosts on the build. And then we have the contractor's gloves for the damage to armor to pair up quite nicely with the SMG that also gives us damage to armor as the minor attribute. Now, in an ideal world, I would take Fox's Prayer over this, just so that I've got damage to armor and damage to targets out of cover, but that would interrupt having Emperor's Guard. If you don't have these and you can only get 2% armor regen, that is absolutely fine. By all means, just go for Fox's here, and then something else here that you would prefer, maybe a Gruppo. As long as it's rolled to blue, that is the most important part. But the 8% multiplicative damage to armor pairs very well with the Sokolov, the Perfect Intimidate, the amplified damage from the Breathe 3 talent, and the damage to armor on the weapon. There's loads of damage bonuses that are all being factored in here, and as a result this build does hit very hard with its base damage. The two skills that I like to use are the Decoy and the Booster Hive, as this is a close range build, so you're going to be in situations sometimes where you need to get out quickly. The Booster Hive just helps you to get in and out more effectively and takes your armor stat away from your own head and onto your decoy, so people won't know what your health is, which with the 3% could actually be quite powerful for you, as they may overstay their welcome. And then the Booster Hive is there just to cleanse all status effects and give us a buff to our handling and Hasbro. It's 22% for me because I have the max 10% stim efficiency mod, but just make sure you get 1 stim efficiency, 1 duration, and then the stim charges on the right hand side. What this will essentially do is give you up to 22% buff amount, which means that I'll reload faster, my gun will be more stable, it will cleanse all status effects, which is very powerful, and give me a bit more hazard resistance for the next 5 seconds. This skill is by no means tied to this build though. If you prefer to run a jammer, an EMP sticky bomb, a defender drone, a shield, again we have the option of the striker shield here, which will give you a SMG potentially 12% more damage. There are plenty of viable options here, so choose whatever it is that you are most comfortable with. Looking at the stats of this build, you can see that the base damage without any of those amplified and multiplicative bonuses is 20.5k. The crit chance is 57.5. I should be able to get this up to 58%. So don't forget, as I said before, if you have a maxed out watch and your Lady Death is maxed to 21%, you will actually hit, I think it's 59% or 58%, which is plenty on this build. So, you know, you don't need to have all 6 pieces crit chance, just have 4 out of the 6. And then the other 2, one will be the Murakami, of course, with the 1% armor regen and ideally crit damage. And the other one could be any other piece on your build that could have crit damage and a secondary minor attribute that isn't going to waste. My crit damage is 155%. Headshot damage is just a default value, but we do have 14% damage to armor, which is fantastic as a multiplicative stat from the contractors and the weapon. No damage to health or targets out of cover, as this is predominantly an armor regen build, and then everything else is just based on the maxed out watch level. Going down to the armor, you can see that I'm at 1.848 million, which is awesome. No armor on kill, but we do have over 60k armor regen due to the 3% on this build, with a little bit extra rolled onto my backpack. So you're going to hit somewhere between 50 and 60k depending on how well your build is set up. Either way, it's a very high figure. You can just run around for a bit, use your decoy to get out of trouble and get a lot of your health back. And of course, don't forget we have the bonus, the armor kit as well from Firewall to help out with that. We do get a bit of health on kill as well, just due to Firewall, and then everything else is based on the maxed out watch level and the Firewall specialization. So that's the 2 builds just there. What I'm now going to do is load into a conflict game solo with the AR version, the Perfect Efficient Firewall, just to show you how effectively that can 1v1. Let's get started. Okay, so we have loaded into Georgetown. Looks like there are a couple of status guys on the other team, so we need to be wary of that. If you do come up against status users, you definitely want to be switching to the Booster Hive. I'm actually going to stick with the EMP Sticky Bomb, because I do think that it is very powerful for 1v1s. So can we see a guy just here, or did I imagine that?
Rogue Stinger Hive
So,
Rogue Defender Drone detected.
I'm get stuck on this car, so just to pop this here, you'll see the power of this. I'm going to drop this on the floor so it doesn't know what my health is. why that went to my left. That was a bit weird, but pushing this guy. The armor kit off. As you see, we're still on 2 here. This guy's right next to me. He's very nearly dead. The armor kit is just getting me up through that, as you can see. Still on 2 as well, which is nice. Still at full health. And this is basically it. So all you do, you take a bit of damage, pop your armor kit, and yeah, win. Can do the same now. Pop the armor kit. We're still on 2. Let's see if we go down to 1. We did. Kind of sucks, but never mind. So you see that stagger there? It stops him from firing for over a second, which is very, very powerful. And obviously we do a lot of damage. I know I've got a teammate helping me here, but this guy was only using a shotgun, so spawns have swapped. So yeah, I really like this build. It's very powerful in the Dark Zone. If you just want to hit up landmark farming, say you're looking to get a pair of Emperor's Guard, for example, or I don't know, a gift or whatever DZ exclusive you're looking for, and you end up hitting landmarks, and ultimately you come across 1 or 2 people that want to go rogue against you, then you know, this build is amazing for sort of dealing with that. What did I lock on up there for? That was weird. Quite sure that guy was running. Terrible shot. It's quite hard to aim if you don't hip fire it. If you do hip fire it, because you don't have the marker, but you do get used to it. Oh, that was a lot of damage. Gotta be careful it. Pop this. Okay, we've used all of our armor kits now. We've got 4 instead of 2, so I'll take that. There's a guy like that. There is a guy there. Try and do is flush him out of cover here. So at this sort of range here, you can just do that, pop it there. Oh, he just got me with it as well.
Rogue striker drone
Now I have no armor kit, so I probably will die here, which is fair enough. Stay away from my teammates so I don't kill them.
The enemy is about to be pulled out.
This is why I don't like status. You see, that guy had to do nothing to get that kill other than use an extremely aggressive aim assist skill to basically one-shot me, even though I've got a 4 blue build. It's way too powerful and far too easy to use for how powerful it is. But you know, we've backed these guys into spawn. We've had a pretty solid game against them, so it is what it is. But yeah, that's essentially the build. So you can see right now I've got the central Coyotes buff. Well, that might be from another teammate, but this is the best part about this build. You're never going to have a bad Coyotes buff by running at 50%, and that's why that is a good threshold. If you get the max range one, you're going to be at the 60% cap. If you get the mid one, you're going to be at the 60% cap with more crit damage. If you get the close range one, you're going to be at the 25% crit damage and still at 50%. So either way, it is very powerful. An armor kit here. Still got 1 left over, which is good. Yeah, I'll sort of bully these guys a little bit. The armor kit real quick. See what I mean? Burn is just ridiculously powerful, like crazy powerful.
You've won an emphatic victory.
So that's the game. Let's have a quick look at the scoreboard. So it looks like we finished on 7 kills with 1 death, and that was just to the status guy with 1 assist. So yeah, the build definitely performs well, even though we don't have a damage talent for the chest, and we're only running vigilance on the back, which is quite easy to lose, and of course the 4 blue. It still performs very well just because I've used the right combination of pieces, you know, with the Fenris and the contractors and foxes, and then of course the perfect efficient. Now what I was really hoping to do was demonstrate a 1v2 or 3 there. You know, I think we didn't quite get that opportunity there. Only 1 person on their team got kills, and it was a status guy. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, what I was hoping to do was demonstrate its capability in 1v situations, which I didn't get to do. I will be using this build on my stream more, so if you do want to check out a bit more usage of the solo builds, go to the description below. You will notice my Twitch channel as well as my Discord server. Get in there as soon as you can, and I will sort of stream a bit more with a few of these builds that I've posted out. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well if you do like the content. I predominantly post PvP and PvE builds. Drop your comments as well. I'm curious to know your own personal solo builds. I did consider a Ridgeways. There's loads of other variants, but yeah, let me know your thoughts. I'll respond to those comments, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.